What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to test our REST API by using the HTTP test library, and we're also going to use SQLite 3 as the database. You can download the Golang cheat sheet from the link in the description below. Remember to share, like, and subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. As you may remember on a previous video, we applied a clean architecture approach to build a RESTful API where we created two endpoints, one to create new posts, another to get existing posts. And this approach allowed us to swap between different databases. We can use Firestore, MySQL, SQLite, and we can also swap between different HTTP frameworks. In this case, we are able to use Chi, or we can use Max, or we can use, Shingonic, or any other HTTP framework that we want. And this approach also enables a better testability of our application. So we created a test in our business logic. So we mocked the repository and we were able to isolate the business layer to test it. Okay, going back to the server. Okay, let's run this. And in this case, we are using Firestore and we are using the child router. So let's go to Postman. First, let's check if we have any posts. If we go to Firebase, we're gonna see that we don't have any posts. So let's create a post using the post HTTP method. And as we can see, if we execute the get operation, we're going to get the post that we just created. And if we go to Firebase, we're going to see that we have a document in the database that is the one that we just created. So one of the properties of our application that applies this clean architecture approach is to swap between different databases. So I'm going to stop this and I'm going to use SQLite 3, actually this repo, where I created basically a table and I created the functions that are part of this post repository interface: save, find all, and delete. And basically the same operations, the same functions that are implemented in the Firestore repo. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the function or the constructor function of this SQLite repo. And I'm going to use that. And I'm going to also change the HTTP router. I'm going to use Max instead of Chi. So I'm going to use this constructor, new Max router here. Okay, let's save this and let's run this again. As we can see, the Max HTTP server is running. Okay, and now I'm going to create this new post. Okay, and now if we go to the SQLite database, we're going to see that we have that record there. Here. Let's create another one. Title 2, text 2. And if we refresh this, let me close this and run this again. We're going to see that now we have the two posts created. And if we execute the get method, we see these two posts that we just created. Okay, let's close this and let's stop the server. And now what we are going to do is we're going to create a new test here for our controller. So let's do that. New file, this is going to be post controller underscore test.go. And what we're going to use here is we're going to use the HTTP test library and we're going to use SQLite as the database. Basically, SQLite creates this file, this .db file. let me show you here. I am creating this file by using this sql.open function, and this is going to create this posts.db file locally. That is actually this one. Okay, I'm going to remove it. Okay, I'm going to close this. Okay, and let's go to our test. So this is going to be package controller, and we are going to create basically two tests. One of them is going to be test add post, where we need to pass the reference to testing library. And the other test is going to be test get posts. If we go to the controller, basically we can see the interface that we have these two functions that we're going to test: add post and get posts. Let's go back to the test. Okay, in order to test this add post controller, that is actually a post request, this post request that we are executing here, we have to do a couple of things. First, we need to create a new HTTP post request. Then we need to use the HTTP library, and we need to assign our controller method as the handler function for that endpoint. So we need to assign this function as the handler function for that request. So this is going to be assign HTTP handler function, and it's going to be the controller add post function. After that, we're going to use the HTTP test library to record the response. Record HTTP response. Here we're going to use HTTP test library. And after that, we are going to dispatch the HTTP request that we created at the beginning of the test. And after that, we are going to add assertions on the HTTP status code and the response. So those are basically the steps that we are going to follow to implement the test for this first endpoint. Okay, let's get started. Here we need to create the JSON request that we are passing here. I'm going to copy this. So it's going to be JSON. And here we need to pass this as a byte array. We need to use backticks here. And we need to use that variable to create our post request. So this is going to be http.new request. And here we need to pass what is the verb that we're going to use. That is going to be post in this case. And the URI. that is going to be slash posts, the same that we are using here. This URI and the post HTTP verb. And we need to pass the JSON like this. Bytes that new buffer, and we need to pass that byte array like this. Okay, that's the first step. Then we need to assign a handler. That's going to be http.handlerfunc, like this. And here we need to pass our controller. So first we need to create that controller. So I'm going to add a bar here. It's going to be post controller. That implements the post controller interface. And I'm going to use the constructor function that is new post controller. And here I need to pass the service. So I need to create the service here. I'm going to put this here. So here we have post service that is going to implement the post service interface. I need to import that package. It's going to be service.postService, and here I need to use the new post service function, where I have to pass the repo. So now I'm going to create the post repo. And I need to also import the repository package. It's going to be repository that post repository. And here I need to use it's going to be a service that new post service, and this is going to be repository that new. And in this case, we're going to use the SQLite database. So this is going to be new SQL. Let me copy that from here. New SQLite repository. Okay, I'm going to paste this. Let's save this. Okay. So, and here, when we create the service, we need to pass the repo. And when we create the controller, we need to pass the service like this. Okay, and now we can assign the controller function like this, post controller that add post. And here I need to assign this request to a variable. And I'm going to ignore any errors here. Okay, and now I need to record this HTTP response. So this is going to be response equals to HTTP test that new recorder. This is going to return a new response recorder. So if we go there, we can see that this is going to return this response recorder. This is actually a struct that includes the HTTP response code, the headers, the body, and some other attributes. Okay, let's go back. And now what we need to do is we need to dispatch this HTTP request, actually that is within this variable. So this is going to be handler that serve HTTP, and here we need to pass the response, and we need to pass the request. So this is going to dispatch this post request, and it's going to save the response using this response recorder. And now we need to add the assertions here. So first we are going to create an assertion on the status code. So this will be status response that code. This is the status code. And here we can check if status is not equals to the 200 HTTP code, HTTP that status okay. This is the 200 code. We're going to inform an error here, like this, error. We can say handler returned a wrong status code, got this, but we want another one, and we're going to pass the status and the expected, that is actually this one, the 200 HTTP code. Okay, and if the HTTP code that we have here is 200, we can make the assertions on the HTTP response. First, we need to decode the HTTP response. We need to transform the JSON into the struct that we have as part of our entity here, this post struct. Let's go back, and here we need to create a post variable. It's going to be post, it's going to be entity that post, and here we need to use a decoder, JSON that new decoder, and here we need to pass the response that body, and we're going to decode this into this post variable that we created here, this one. Okay, and this new decoder, we need to use another type here, that is io.reader. So we're going to cast that type to the reader type. Okay, now we're good. And here we can add some assertions. On the HTTP response. So we can use the assert library from Testify. So we can check that the identifier is not nil. We need to pass the reference to the testing library. Now, in this case, we just pass the identifier, post.id. Okay, and now I'm going to add another assertion. I need to pass the reference to the test, the expected value, and I'm going to create a constant. So let's add a couple of constants actually, one for the text and another one for the title. Const title string equals to title 1 and another one for the text. Text is going to be text 1. Okay, and let's make a few changes here. Okay, that should be fine. And now I'm going to use these constants here for the assertions. So the first one is going to be title, and here is post that title. And the last one is going to be text and post that text, like this. Okay. So I think we're good. Let's run this test. And the test is going to pass. Okay, another way that we have to run this test is by using go test -b -run, and we can pass the name of the method that we are testing. Actually, we need to do that from the controller folder. Let's run this, and as we can see, the test is passing. Okay, let's go back. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a method so we don't have any records in the SQLite database once we finish this test. So I'm going to create a cleanup method that is going to run after this test. It's going to be cleanup database, and I'm going to create the function here, func cleanup, and I'm going to pass the post. So I'm going to remove that post. And here I'm using lowercase because this is a private function. If I use lowercase here, this is not going to run because it's not public. If I try to run this, it's not going to run because the test needs to be public to run. Here we get this warning, no test to run, because we need to make it uppercase to make it public, and now we can run it. And now we can see that it's running and it's passing. Okay, let's clear this. Let's go back and let's work on our cleanup method. This is basically going to call this, let me find the interface, this one. It's going to call this function from the repo. So let's go back to the test. So here I'm going to use post repo that delete, and I'm going to pass the post. And this is going to be entity that post. Okay, I need to pass here, this is the reference to the post, and here I'm going to call it cleanup, and I'm going to pass the post. Sorry, the reference to the post, like that. Okay. Okay, now if I run the test, okay, and now if I go to the database, it should be empty. Yes, it's empty because I'm removing the post that I'm creating. If I comment this, and if I run the test, we're going to see that the record is still in the database here. Okay, let's clean up the database, and now let's work on this second endpoint. So in this case, we need to create and a get HTTP request. So this is going to be pretty similar to this one. But we're going to change a couple of things. We are not going to pass any parameters. As we can see here, we are not passing any parameters. And here we need to use the get HTTP verb. And here we need to pass nil, like this. Okay. And now we need to assign a handler. It's going to be the same. So I'm going to copy all this. Yeah, it's going to be pretty much the same with some tweaks in the middle. Okay, this is going to be get posts. So it's going to be get posts. Here I need to create a new response recorder. I need to dispatch this get request. I need to add assertions on this status code. This is the same. And here the response, here I get, if we go to the function, here I get from the service, here, I get an array of posts. So I need to use that here. I'm going to rename this as posts. And this is going to be posts. And here, instead of post, it's going to be posts. And I'm going to grab the first element of the array. Sorry, this is posts. And here I need to pass the first element of the array. Okay, and one thing that I need to do here, I need to actually insert a new post in the database so I can get results when I execute this get request. Because now the database is empty. So I'm going to add a new function that is going to be a setup function that is going to insert a new record in the database. Let's call it setup. And here I need to create a new post, var post entity dot post. And I'm going to create a new post. It's going to have an identifier. And I'm going to create another constant here. There's going to be an identifier. The type is going to be int64. And let's say it's going to be 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to use that identifier here. And I need to pass a title. That's going to be title. And a text. That's going to be text, like this. Okay, and now I need to insert this post in the database. So I need to use the repo, post repo, that, and let me check the interface. Save. Okay. This is the reference, like this. Okay, now I'm going to use this function at the beginning of this test. Insert new post. So it's going to be set up. And let's run this again. And now, as we can see, the test is passing. Okay, and now we have our two tests created where we are using SQLite as the repo for these tests. So we are using a local database. We don't depend on any network connection or anything. So for each test, we are creating a new HTTP request, a post request in this case, and in this case, a get request. We are assigning the controller function as the handler for that HTTP request. We are recording the response. We are dispatching that request that we create at the beginning of the test, and we store the response using this recorder, and then we add assertions on the status code and the body of the response. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.